6 seconds of security footage. That's all it took to destroy 3 lives and expose the darkest truth about family, greed, and murder. In those 6 seconds, an elderly woman embraced her nurse in a hospital hallway. 4 years later, that nurse would be found executed in the Montana mountains, and those same 6 seconds would be used as evidence in one of the most twisted inheritance murder cases in American history. This is the story of how 2 children killed the woman who cared for their dying mother, all because they couldn't accept that love isn't defined by blood, it's defined by presence. Before we get into this absolutely insane case, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. This story is going to take you on a journey you won't believe, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Pay attention to this security camera footage. November 2019. A hospice care facility hallway. The camera captures a corridor. A nurse in scrubs exits a patient room. Behind her, an elderly woman using a walker follows. They move into the hallway. The elderly woman stops. The nurse turns around. They embrace. The elderly woman is crying. Her shoulders shake. The nurse holds her. The clip runs for 6 seconds. Then it ends. That's all it shows. An embrace. An elderly woman crying. A nurse comforting her. 6 seconds. This moment will become the center of a murder case. Because 4 years later, the nurse in that video will be found dead in the mountains of Montana. And the elderly woman's children will claim this footage proves manipulation, proves fraud, proves their mother was being exploited. But what this footage actually shows is something simpler. Gratitude, connection, and the reason a dying woman chose to leave $8 million to the person who cared for her over the family who abandoned her. April 19, 2023, 7:42 in the morning. Bridger Canyon, Montana. A hiker on a trail in the Bridger Mountains finds a body off the path. Female, mid-50s. The hiker calls 911. Sheriff's deputies arrive by 8:15 in the morning. They identify the victim as Audrey Fiske, 53 years old, a hospice nurse who lived in Bozeman. Single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Execution style. The body has been there for less than 24 hours. Her car is found 2 miles away, abandoned on a logging road. Her purse, phone, and wallet are still in the vehicle. Her jewelry is still on her body. Wedding ring from a previous marriage. Watch. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. The investigation begins immediately. To understand who killed Audrey Fiske and why, you need to know who she was and who she cared for. Starting with Audrey. Audrey Fiske, 53 years old in 2023. Born and raised in rural Montana. Grew up on a ranch outside Billings. Wanted to be a nurse from a young age. Put herself through nursing school working 2 jobs. Graduated in 1995. Spent her 20s working in hospital settings. ICU, emergency, high-stress environments. By her mid-30s, she was burned out. In 2005, she transitioned to hospice care. It was a better fit. Slower pace, more meaningful interactions with patients. Audrey was known for her compassion, her patience, her ability to make people feel seen in their final months. She worked for a hospice agency in Bozeman. The agency sent her to patients' homes. She provided in-home care for terminal patients. Pain management, comfort care, emotional support. Audrey was good at her job. Patients requested her specifically. Families trusted her. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a presence, a constant during the worst time in people's lives. In 2006, Audrey was assigned to a new patient. Estelle Bishop, a 67-year-old woman who had just been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Estelle lived in a large home on the outskirts of Bozeman. Wealthy. Her late husband, Langston, had been a successful real estate developer. He died in 2005, left Estelle with a fortune estimated at $9 million. Estelle had 2 adult children, a son and a daughter. Both lived out of state. Both had their own careers, their own families. Estelle's prognosis was uncertain. The cancer had spread to her lymph nodes. Treatment would be aggressive. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. The hospice agency sent Audrey to provide supportive care during treatment. Audrey visited Estelle 3 times a week, helped with medication side effects, monitored symptoms, provided companionship during the hardest days. Estelle and Audrey connected immediately. Estelle appreciated Audrey's calm demeanor, her honesty. Audrey didn't sugarcoat the reality of the disease, but she also didn't make Estelle feel hopeless. They talked about life, about Estelle's late husband, about her children, about regrets and gratitude. Over the months, they became close. Not just nurse and patient. Friends. By early 2007, Estelle's cancer went into remission. The tumors had shrunk. Scans were clear. She didn't need hospice care anymore. Audrey's assignment ended, but Estelle and Audrey stayed in touch. They exchanged phone calls, occasional visits. Estelle considered Audrey a friend, someone who had been there during the darkest time. 3 years later, in 2009, Estelle's cancer returned. The breast cancer had metastasized, spread to her bones. The doctors said treatment could extend her life, but wouldn't cure her. Estelle called the hospice agency, asked for Audrey specifically. Audrey was assigned to her again. This time the care was more intensive. Estelle was in more pain, weaker. Audrey came 4 times a week, sometimes 5. She managed Estelle's pain medication, helped her with daily tasks, sat with her during the worst days. Estelle's children visited occasionally. Her son Julian came twice that year. Her daughter Paige came once. They were busy. Julian was a corporate attorney in Denver. Paige was a senior executive at a tech company in Seattle. They had demanding jobs, young children. They couldn't drop everything to care for their mother. That's what they told themselves. That's what they told Estelle. Audrey was there. That was enough. By 2010, Estelle's cancer stabilized. With treatment, the progression slowed. She wasn't in remission, but she wasn't declining rapidly either. She lived in a kind of stasis, managing the disease, living with it. Audrey continued visiting. Even though Estelle wasn't actively dying, she still needed support. Audrey came twice a week, helped with appointments, with prescriptions, with the emotional weight of living with terminal illness. Estelle's children visited a few times a year. Holidays, birthdays, brief visits, always rushed, always apologizing for not staying longer. In 2015, Estelle's condition worsened. The cancer had spread to her liver, her lungs. The doctors said she had maybe 2 years. Estelle was 76. She'd been living with cancer for 9 years. She was tired, but she wasn't ready to give up. Audrey resumed more intensive care, 4 to 5 visits per week. Estelle was now on full palliative care. The goal was comfort, quality of life, dignity. Audrey provided that. For the next 8 years, from 2015 to 2023, Audrey visited Estelle over 1,800 times. Helped her through pain, through fear, through loneliness. Estelle's children visited maybe 5 or 6 times a year. Julian came for Christmas and Estelle's birthday. Paige came for Thanksgiving if her schedule allowed. They called occasionally, but they weren't there. Audrey was. By 2023, Estelle had been living with cancer for 17 years. Audrey had been part of her life for all of it. Over that time, Audrey had visited Estelle more than 2,200 times. Estelle's children had visited maybe 50 times total. The contrast was stark, and Estelle noticed. She told Audrey more than once that Audrey felt more like family than her own children. Audrey always deflected. Said she was just doing her job. But it was more than that, and both of them knew it. Now the second person you need to know is Estelle Bishop. 67 in 2006. 84 when she died in January 2023. Estelle came from money. Her father owned a chain of hardware stores across Montana. She married Langston Bishop in 1963. Langston was ambitious, built a real estate development company from nothing. By the 1990s, he was one of the wealthiest men in Montana. They had 2 children. Julian in 1963, Paige in 1966. Estelle was a devoted mother when the kids were young, but as they grew up and moved away, her world shrank. Langston worked constantly. She spent her time at charity events, book clubs, garden parties. When Langston died in 2005, Estelle was devastated. They'd been married 42 years. She inherited everything. $9 million, the house, investment properties, but she was alone. Her children had their own lives. She understood, but it hurt. When the cancer came, it made the loneliness worse. She needed help. She needed someone, and that someone was Audrey. Estelle wasn't naive. She knew Audrey was paid to be there. But over the years she saw that Audrey cared beyond the paycheck. Audrey came even when her shift was over. Brought flowers on Estelle's birthday. Remembered details about Estelle's life. Asked about her late husband, her grandchildren. Audrey listened, and that meant everything. By 2020, Estelle had been living with cancer for 14 years. She'd outlived every prognosis, but she knew her time was limited. She started thinking about her legacy, about who had truly been there, and she made a decision. The third and fourth people you need to know are Julian Banks and Paige Sterling, Estelle's children. Julian was 60 years old in 2023, a partner at a corporate law firm in Denver. Specialized in mergers and acquisitions, made over $500,000 a year, married, 3 kids, lived in a mansion in Cherry Hills. Julian visited his mother 2 or 3 times a year. Christmas, her birthday, maybe one other time if he was in Montana for work. He called her every few weeks. The conversations were short. Surface level. He loved his mother, but he was busy. He assumed she understood. Paige was 57 in 2023, senior vice president at a tech company in Seattle. Oversaw a team of 200 employees, made just under $1 million a year, including stock options. Divorced, 2 kids. Paige visited her mother even less than Julian, maybe once or twice a year. She called once a month. Paige felt guilty, but not guilty enough to change her behavior. She told herself her mother had help. She had Audrey. Paige sent money occasionally. Expensive gifts. She thought that was enough. Both Julian and Paige knew Audrey existed. They'd met her a few times over the years. They were grateful someone was taking care of their mother. It freed them from the responsibility. They never thought much about it. Never thought about what it meant that a stranger was spending more time with their mother than they were. Not until it was too late. In November 2020, Estelle called her attorney, not Julian, a private attorney she'd worked with for years. She told him she wanted to update her will. The attorney came to her home. Estelle was lucid, clear-minded. She explained what she wanted. Her old will left everything split evenly between Julian and Paige. $4.5 million each. The new will was different. Julian would get $500,000. Paige would get $500,000. The remaining $8.2 million would go to Audrey Fiske, her nurse. The attorney asked if she was sure. Estelle said she'd never been more sure. She explained that Audrey had been there for her for 14 years through multiple cancer recurrences, through over 2,000 visits. Her children had visited maybe 40 times in 14 years. Audrey had earned it. The attorney asked if Estelle wanted to tell her children. Estelle said no. She wanted them to find out after she was gone. She wanted them to understand what they'd lost by not being there. The will was signed, witnessed, legally binding. Estelle told the attorney to keep it confidential until her death. 3 independent doctors evaluated Estelle's mental competency before she signed. All confirmed she was lucid, capable of making informed decisions. No signs of cognitive impairment. Estelle lived for 2 more years. The cancer progressed slowly. Audrey continued her care, 5 visits a week by 2022. Estelle was better than most of the time in pain, but Audrey kept her comfortable. In January 2023, Estelle's condition deteriorated rapidly. Audrey was with her almost every day that final week. On January 14th, Estelle died peacefully in her sleep. Audrey was in the room holding her hand. Julian and Paige were notified. They flew in for the funeral. It was a small service. Audrey attended, sat in the back, didn't speak to the family. She grieved quietly. She'd lost someone she cared about deeply. 2 weeks later, The attorney called Julian and Paige for the reading of the will. They assumed it would be straightforward, split everything 50-50. The attorney read the will aloud. Julian and Paige sat in stunned silence. $500,000 each. $8.2 million to Audrey Fiske. They couldn't believe it. Julian was the first to speak. He asked if there was a mistake. The attorney said no. The will was clear, legally sound. Estelle had been evaluated by 3 doctors before signing. All confirmed she was mentally competent. Paige asked who Audrey Fiske was. The attorney reminded them. Their mother's nurse. Paige's face went red. She said this was insane. Their mother had been manipulated. Julian agreed, said they'd contest the will. The attorney warned them. Contesting would be expensive, difficult. Estelle had taken every precaution to ensure the will was bulletproof. But Julian and Paige didn't care. This wasn't about the money, they said. It was about protecting their mother's legacy, about stopping someone who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. The estate entered probate. Standard process. Even uncontested, probate in Montana takes 60 to 90 days before assets can be distributed. Julian and Paige filed a formal challenge. This extended the timeline, froze the assets. No one could receive anything until the court ruled on the validity of the will. Julian and Paige hired a private investigator, told him to find anything he could on Audrey Fiske, anything that would prove manipulation, fraud, undue influence. The investigator dug. He found nothing incriminating. Audrey had no criminal record, no history of financial impropriety. She was a hospice nurse who had cared for Estelle for 17 years. The investigator accessed the hospice facility's archived security footage. He found the clip from November 2019. The hallway embrace, the crying. He showed it to Julian and Paige. They watched it, and they saw what they wanted to see. Julian said it was proof. Look at how their mother is crying. She's vulnerable, emotional. Audrey is manipulating her, building dependence. Paige agreed. Said this was grooming. Audrey had been grooming their mother for years, isolating her from her real family. The investigator cautioned them, said the footage could be interpreted differently. But Julian and Paige didn't want to hear it. They took the clip, submitted it as evidence in their legal challenge, claimed it showed a pattern of emotional manipulation. The case went to probate court in March 2023. Julian and Paige's attorney presented the footage, argued it showed Audrey exploiting Estelle's vulnerability. Audrey's attorney countered, called in psychologists, geriatric specialists. They reviewed the footage. All of them said the same thing. This isn't manipulation. This is gratitude. This is a patient expressing appreciation for years of compassionate care. The embrace is mutual, consensual. There's no sign of coercion. One psychologist pointed out that Estelle initiated the hug. She reached out first. That's not consistent with someone being manipulated. The attorney also presented Estelle's medical records, showed that 3 independent doctors had evaluated her mental competency before she signed the will. All 3 confirmed she was lucid, understood what she was doing, had no cognitive impairment. The judge reviewed everything. On April 3, 2023, the judge ruled the will was valid. Estelle had been competent. The distribution of assets would proceed as written. Julian and Paige's challenge was denied. The estate would remain in probate for final processing. Assets would be distributed within 30 to 45 days. By mid-May, Audrey would receive the $8.2 million. The footage was shown on local news. The story went viral regionally. Headlines read, "Children contest mother's will after she leaves fortune to nurse." Public opinion was split. Some sympathized with Julian and Paige. Said it was suspicious. Others pointed out the math. Over 2,000 visits versus 50. Audrey had been there. They hadn't. Julian and Paige were humiliated. Their names were in the press, their reputations damaged, and they'd lost. Within weeks, Audrey would be a millionaire. Julian and Paige couldn't accept it. Julian knew the timeline. He'd worked in estate law early in his career. Once the judge validated the will, the clock was ticking. The estate administrator would finalize asset transfers within 45 days. After that, The money would legally belong to Audrey. If she died before the transfer completed, it would complicate everything. Heirs, probate, reopening, delays, maybe even grounds to challenge again. But if Audrey died after the money was transferred, it was over. Her heirs would inherit. Julian and Paige would never see a dime. They had maybe 4 weeks, that's it, for weeks to act. In early April 2023, Julian and Paige met privately. No lawyers, no spouses, just the two of them. They discussed options. Legal avenues were exhausted. But there was another way. If Audrey died before the estate transferred the funds, everything would freeze again. Uncertainty, chaos. Maybe they could argue the will was invalid due to suspicious circumstances surrounding Audrey's death. Maybe they'd get another chance. It was desperate. It was insane. But they were out of options. Julian knew people through his law firm. He'd interacted with clients who operated in gray areas. He made a call. Within a week, he'd arranged a meeting with someone who could make problems disappear. The price was $50,000 cash. Julian and Paige split it. They provided Audrey's address, her schedule, her routines. The job was set for mid-April before the money transferred. April 18, 2023 evening. Audrey finishes her shift at the hospice facility, drives home to her small house on the edge of Bozeman. She's tired, emotionally drained. She's been grieving Estelle, processing the trial, the accusations, the media coverage. She pulls into her driveway around 8 o'clock in the evening, gets out of her car. A man is waiting in the shadows. He's wearing dark clothing, gloves, mask. He approaches quickly, says nothing. Audrey turns, sees him, starts to speak. The man raises a gun, fires once. Back of the head. Audrey drops instantly. The man checks for a pulse. She's dead. He drags her body to a vehicle parked nearby. Drives into the mountains, takes her to Bridger Canyon, a remote area where hikers rarely go this time of year. He leaves the body off a trail. No attempt to hide it extensively. No attempt to stage a scene. It's an execution. Clean, simple. He drives back, abandons Audrey's car on a logging road, leaves her purse and phone inside, makes it look like she pulled over for some reason. Then he disappears. He's gone by midnight. The next morning, a hiker finds the body. The investigation moves quickly. Detectives notice immediately this isn't random. Execution-style killing. Body dumped in remote location, but no robbery, no sexual assault. This is professional. They start with people who had motive. Audrey's family is interviewed. She had a younger sister in Billings. They were close but had no conflicts. Audrey's ex-husband lives in Oregon. Hasn't seen her in years. No motive. Then detectives learn about the will, about Julian and Paige, about the trial, about the timing. The court ruled on April 3rd. Audrey was killed on April 18th, 2 weeks later, right before the estate would finalize the transfer. Detectives pull financial records. Julian withdrew $25,000 in cash on April 5th, 2 days after losing in court. Paige withdrew $25,000 on April 6th. Both claimed the withdrawals were for business expenses. Neither can provide documentation. Detectives pull phone records. Julian's phone shows a call to a burner number on April 7th. The call lasted 2 minutes. Julian claims he doesn't remember making it. Must have been a wrong number. Paige's phone shows text messages to Julian in the days before the murder. Encrypted messaging app. The messages are vague but suspicious. References to taking care of the problem, to making sure things don't go through. Detectives get warrants. Search Julian's home in Denver, Paige's home in Seattle. They find more burner phones, more encrypted messages. Julian's messages reference a contact, someone who could handle a job, the payment, the timeline. Paige's messages show she knew, approved, coordinated. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because this case is about to get even more unbelievable. Detectives track the burner number Julian called. It's registered to a known criminal with ties to contract violence. The man's name is in a federal database. He has priors for assault, weapons charges. He's currently on probation. Detectives bring him in. He lawyers up immediately, but his financials tell the story. A deposit of $50,000 on April 19th, the day after Audrey's murder. The money came from an offshore account. Detectives trace it. It connects to a shell company. The company has ties to one of Julian's corporate clients. The web is unraveling. The hired killer cuts a deal, testifies against Julian and Paige in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admits everything. Says Julian contacted him through an intermediary. Paid him half upfront, half after. Provided Audrey's information, her address, her routine. The killer says Paige was involved. She approved the payment. Both of them wanted Audrey dead before the money transferred. Julian and Paige are arrested on April 25th. The arrests are coordinated, public, deliberate. Detectives want the perp walk, want the optics. Julian is arrested at his law firm in Denver. Mid-morning. He's in a meeting with senior partners and clients. 3 FBI agents walk in. Flash badges tell him he's under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder. Julian stands, tries to maintain composure. They cuff him in front of everyone, his colleagues, his clients, the people he's worked with for 20 years. They walk him out through the lobby. News cameras are waiting outside. The footage airs that evening. Prominent attorney arrested for murder for hire. His face is everywhere. Paige is arrested at her office in Seattle. She's in a boardroom giving a quarterly presentation to the executive team. Seattle PD walks in with FBI agents, interrupts the meeting, reads her rights in front of the entire board, cuffs her in front of 15 executives. She's escorted out. Security footage from the building is leaked online within hours. Goes viral. The humiliation is complete. Both of their careers are over. Julian is disbarred within days. Paige is terminated immediately. Their reputations destroyed, and the case hasn't even gone to trial yet. The trial begins in September 2023. The prosecution's case is overwhelming. The evidence includes financial records showing the cash withdrawals, phone records linking Julian to the hired killer, text messages discussing the plan, the killer's testimony describing the job in detail, and the security footage from November 2019, the same footage Julian and Paige used to try to prove manipulation. The prosecution shows it again, but this time they use it to prove motive. They argue that Julian and Paige saw this moment of love and compassion and interpreted it as manipulation because they couldn't accept that their mother loved someone else more than them. That their jealousy and greed blinded them. That they killed Audrey not because she manipulated their mother, but because she cared for their mother when they didn't. The footage that Julian and Paige thought would save them becomes the evidence that condemns them. The defense tries to argue desperation. That Julian and Paige believed Audrey had manipulated their mother, that their actions, while wrong, were driven by genuine belief they were protecting their mother's legacy. But the jury doesn't buy it. The evidence of premeditation is too clear. The encrypted messages, the cash payments, the coordination with a hired killer, the timing, everything points to calculated murder for financial gain. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returns guilty on all counts. Julian is convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Paige is convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder. Sentencing comes a month later. Julian gets life without parole. Paige gets 40 years. Earliest possibility of parole in 2063. She'll be 97 years old. Under Montana's Slayer statute, either Julian nor Paige can inherit anything from Estelle's estate due to their convictions. The $500,000 each was supposed to receive is forfeited. The entire estate, all $9 million after legal fees, would have gone to Audrey. But Audrey is dead. The estate administrator determines that since Audrey died before the funds were transferred, her inheritance passes to her designated beneficiaries. Audrey had named her younger sister as her sole beneficiary years earlier. The sister, a school teacher in Billings, inherits the $8.2 million. She's shocked, overwhelmed. She uses $2 million to establish a fund in Audrey's name. The Audrey Fiske Compassionate Care Scholarship. It provides full tuition for nursing students who want to work in hospice and palliative care. The rest she invests, lives modestly, honors her sister's memory by supporting the kind of work Audrey dedicated her life to. Julian and Paige lose everything. Their careers, their reputations, their freedom, the money they killed for. The irony is absolute. They visited their mother 50 times in 17 years. Audrey visited over 2,200 times. Their mother recognized that, rewarded it. And when Julian and Paige couldn't accept it, they committed murder and got nothing. Worse than nothing. They lost their lives, their families, everything. Audrey Fiske was 53 years old. She spent 17 years caring for a woman who wasn't her family, who didn't owe her anything beyond a paycheck. But Audrey gave more than what was required. She gave her time, her compassion, her presence. And a dying woman recognized that, chose to honor it. Julian and Paige saw that recognition as theft, as manipulation, because they couldn't accept that presence matters more than blood, that showing up matters more than sharing DNA, and their refusal to accept that truth cost them everything. This case is a reminder that relationships require effort, that love requires presence, that you can't expect to be valued if you're never there. Estelle didn't leave her fortune to Audrey because she was manipulated. She left it to Audrey because Audrey earned it. Through 17 years of showing up, of being present, of caring when no one else did. Julian and Paige thought they were entitled to their mother's money because they were her children. But Estelle's will was her final statement. Biology doesn't equal devotion. Presence does. And Audrey was present for 17 years. That mattered more than any blood relation ever could. The security footage from November 2019 captured a moment of pure gratitude. A dying woman thanking the person who made her years bearable. Julian and Paige saw that footage and twisted it into evidence of wrongdoing. But the only wrongdoing was their own, their neglect, their selfishness, their greed. And when that footage was shown in court during their murder trial, the truth was undeniable. They killed Audrey not because she did something wrong. They killed her because she did everything right, and they couldn't stand it. They killed her because they had 4 weeks before she received the money. 4 weeks before their last chance disappeared. And in their desperation, they made a decision that destroyed their lives for nothing. Audrey Fiske is buried in a small cemetery outside Bozeman. Her grave overlooks the mountains, the Bridger Range where her body was found. Her sister visits often. So do former patients' families, people whose loved ones Audrey cared for over the years. They leave flowers, notes. One note left by a woman whose father Audrey cared for in 2018 reads simply, "You gave my father dignity, thank you." That's who Audrey was. That's what she did. And that's why Estelle Bishop left her a fortune. Not because of manipulation, because of love. The kind of love that shows up every week for 17 years, even when no one's watching, even when no one else cares. Julian and Paige will spend the rest of their lives in prison, knowing they destroyed themselves over money they were never entitled to. Knowing they killed a woman whose only crime was being there when they weren't. And knowing that if they just visited their mother more than 50 times in 17 years, none of this would have happened. If they'd been present even a fraction as much as Audrey was, their mother might have left them everything. But they weren't. Audrey was, and that made all the difference. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life who truly show up for you, do me a favor. Subscribe to 72-Hour True Crime right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment below telling me what you think about this case. Was justice truly served? Did Audrey deserve that inheritance? And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the most shocking true crime cases. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.